It seems like every generation gets called soft at some point. Lazy, entitled, doesn't want to work. Like somehow this is a brand new problem that just showed up out of nowhere. It's not. But that label's been around for a long time and it just gets passed down. And if you've ever heard someone say, this generation just doesn't want it bad enough, go ahead and hit that like, follow, and share button before we get after it. It's Labor Lines. Let's get into it. Now I want to make something clear right from the start. I'm not sitting here saying one generation had it harder than the other. Every generation's had its own problems, its own pressures, and its own version of what life and work looked like when they were coming up. The other thing is this: we live on a social media bubble now. We see a lot of stuff and a lot of opinions and a lot of narratives that we want to believe are true, but just because it gets repeated doesn't mean it actually is. And that's not what this is all about anyway. This is about understanding why things look different and why younger workers are being judged like the conditions never changed, because they did change, and they changed fast. Gen Z is the first generation that came into the world with computers, smartphones, and instant access to information already built into daily life. They didn't adapt to it later. They started there, and that changes how people think, how they communicate, and how they solve problems. So when they stepped into work, they didn't just follow the same process. They looked for better, faster, more efficient ways. And that's where I think people get this wrong. Working smarter gets mistaken for not wanting to work hard. Using better tools or technology gets treated like weakness instead of progress. But if a job gets done better, faster, and safer, that's not something to mock, that's something to look up to. Now, millennials sit in a different spot. A lot of them grew up right before all of this really took off. Some adapted easily, some didn't, some live in both worlds. And that's part of what makes this conversation so messy. You've got one group that remembers how things used to be, and another that never knew anything else. So of course they're not going to look at work the same way. And it never fails. People want to believe the way they learned was better, because when that gets questioned, it can feel like a reflection on them. But it's not a reflection. It just means things changed. And technology isn't the only reason. The other reason, of course, is money. And this is where the label really starts to fall apart. The federal minimum wage hasn't gone up since 2009. It's been sitting at $7.25 the entire time Gen Z was still being born and growing up, while everything else kept moving, like housing costs and rent and debt. Basic living expenses have gone up. And here's the part that really puts that into perspective. Some estimates say if minimum wage had kept up with inflation and productivity, it would be well over $20 an hour today. So when people say the math doesn't work anymore, they're not imagining it. The math actually changed. And that's before you even get into student debt, burnout, or the pressure of being plugged in all of the time. Because burnout isn't laziness. Younger workers aren't automatically refusing work. A lot of what we're seeing is stress, pressure, and people questioning whether the deal they're being offered is actually worth it. And at the same time, they're also refusing to put up with the same kind of treatment that used to be accepted as just part of the job. And I know especially in the trades, that can get labeled as weakness. But let's be honest, nobody likes getting yelled at or run into the ground, and nobody does their best work in that kind of environment. So for them, putting a premium on mental health makes sense. So maybe that's not weakness, maybe that's someone setting a better standard. And that leads to another question that doesn't get asked enough. What if part of the problem is how we're bringing the next generation into work? And I'm not talking about schools, I'm talking about the field. Things like job site, the people they're learning from every day, like parents and foremen and co-workers, the ones showing them how this actually works. Because we're real quick to judge how younger workers show up, but we don't always stop and ask what they were shown when they got there. If the world changed but the way we teach didn't, then some of that disconnect might not be on them. It might be on us. But again, this is not me blaming anyone, but saying maybe we should look in the mirror a little closer, because you've got a generation coming in that's used to solving problems faster, using better tools, and finding more efficient ways to get things done. And instead of seeing that as strength, sometimes it gets treated like they're cutting corners. And if we're being honest, sometimes that pushback isn't really about the work. Sometimes it's because they found a better way, and that's not always easy to accept. But that's how things move forward, and that's why I don't think this is a bad thing. Maybe the issue isn't that people don't want to work. Maybe it's that they want their work to make more sense. They want better tools and a system that gives something back. They want to build something, not just stay stuck trying to keep up. And honestly, I don't think that's something to make fun of, because that's what you call progress. It's just different than what you're used to. So when you hear someone say, this generation just doesn't want to work, maybe the better question is this: are they avoiding work, or are they calling out a system that isn't working anymore? Because those are two very different things. And if that makes people uncomfortable, maybe it's not because it's wrong, maybe it's because it hits closer than they want it to. And while you're sitting there thinking of ways to beat me up in the comments, think about this. Saying the next generation is weak, lazy, and entitled is a lot easier than admitting things changed, and maybe you haven't. And that change you're pushing back on might be exactly what you've been wanting all along. This wraps up our Gen Z and Millennials series, and it's going to roll in right into a new one. Make sure to like, follow, and share so you don't miss it. This is Labor Lines with Alex. As always, my good friends, be safe, be productive, be well.